Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope you're all well. Today's video I'm going to be showing you the basics of how to use a bead loom, and then I'm going to show you how to make and finish a bead loom bracelet. So this is what the kind of bracelets look like when you do them on the loom. So they're very neat rows of beads like this. You can create so many different patterns. You can do them really wide, you can do them really narrow. This is a fun one. And you can also create letters and words like this that I made for the World Cup last year, was it, or the year before? I forget now. When you're choosing your beads, the best advice I can give is that very contrasting colours are going to give the best effect. Like this one here, where you've got the white background and then the dark crisscrosses, same as this one. That's going to give a really nice effect, so you can really see the pattern that you're working to create, like these. This one did not have such contrasting colours, and it doesn't have such a good kind of standout effect. The pattern is not as bold, but it still looks good. But that's some advice I'd give if you're going to start a pattern. It's really going to work best like these with very contrasting colours. It's going to give the best effect from a distance. But if you are going to be creating letters like this, I would always say to leave at least a row at the top and the bottom, so you've got like a border all the way round, and in between each letter as well. And then for the letters themselves, advice I'd give about that is to try and make sure they each take up a very similar amount of rows, so that your letters stay like the same kind of size. When it comes to finishing the bracelets, that's the thing that I found quite like daunting when I first started making them. And you get to the end and you've got like so many threads at both ends, and I was like really didn't know what to do with them. So in the past I've done things like this, where I've got to the end, I've sewn all the threads, so like 8 threads back in, and tied knots, and then I've kept one long one and created this at each end. That does take a lot of work, obviously, you know, there's a lot of threads there to sew back in. So then I found out about these little tubes you can get that slide over the last row of beads, so there's a row of beads in there that you can't see, and it finishes it off. It's a lot quicker, a lot neater, and they're a lot more accessible to get now. You can get them on Amazon, and I'll leave a link below for some of those that I found on Amazon that are a reasonable price, and you get like a good variation of sizes as well. So today I'm going to be showing you how to finish it off using one of these tubes, but like I said before, if you want to sew all your threads back in, tie a knot with them all, and then create this kind of finish instead, then that's another option for you. Today I'm going to be showing you how to do this pattern. It's a really simple pattern for you to follow, and then I'll be able to get you going on it and then skip ahead so you can finish it, and then I'll show you how to finish off the bracelet as well. So you'll obviously need a bead loom. So this is the one that I use, and it's called the Jewel Loom, and this is the person that created it, and it's from Bead Loom. And I'll leave a link for this below, but you can get this at a lot of different bead stores. It's on Amazon. Search Jewel Loom online and you'll find plenty of places that stock this. I really do recommend it. I did use a different kind when I first started out. I used one of these like solid blocks like this, but there's not much length to it, so if I wanted to make something a bit longer, as you can see, that's almost like the limit that I could make. So this gives you a bit more flexibility, and it's curved like this, so it sort of rocks. So when I'm using this one, like today I'll show you like flat on the bead mat so you can see, when I'm using it, I sort of hold it up like this, rest it against me, and then it's like really comfortable to use, I find. So definitely recommend this one. And I always leave mine assembled like this. I leave this rod in. It was so difficult to get the rod in the first place. That's one thing that I found really difficult with it. But now that it's in, I leave it in. I don't know if you're supposed to take it out when you take the bracelet off, I'm not really sure, but I leave it in and I've never had any issues with it. So you'll need your threads. I'm using a Nymo thread for the warp threads, any beading thread that you prefer. And then I'm going to use Fireline for the actual weaving, just because I like it better than the Nymo, which I find tangles up quite easily. You'll need a beading needle, scissors to cut your thread, you'll need some pliers to handle your clasps, you'll need your clasps, your jump rings if you're making a bracelet, and then like I said before, if you're going to do the same technique as me, you'll need some of these slide end tubes. So this is what they look like. This pack comes with all different sizes and I'm going to try and link one similar below for you. You'll also need some super glue or E6000 or something like that, like a strong glue. That's to secure your knots at the end, which we'll get to a bit later on. And then most importantly, of course, you'll need your beads. You can do this with round seed beads, but I definitely recommend that you get some Delica beads, Miyuki Delica. So they are cut flat like a tube, if you can see that, so they all sit perfectly together. Obviously the round seed beads are like this and there's going to be little gaps in between your beads, but because these are cut flat, it makes this perfect pattern and they're all exactly the same size. So I definitely recommend using Delica beads. For this particular design that we're going to be doing today, you'll need one colour for the outside edge, so like the gold and silver on these. Then you'll need just as many different colours as you want to go down the middle. That's completely up to you. You could do all one colour or lots of different colours like these. So before you get started, you'll need to come up with your pattern so that you know how many strings you need to thread onto your loom. So if you're going to be doing something a bit more complicated, like this, or even if you're planning to do letters or a word on there, then I'd recommend, now you can either draw out a graph for yourself or you can get these books. This is a seed bead graph paper book and it just looks like this. So it's just like blank rows of beads, and that way you can plan out your patterns like I've done here. So you just plan them out like that, and that's a good way for planning out a pattern. It makes it easier to follow, especially when you're just starting out. So today obviously I'm going to be showing you the pattern myself, and something like this where you're just doing straight lines, it's pretty simple, you don't really need to plan that one out in the book. Okay, so now we're going to get started with the actual loom. So before you begin, you need to decide on your pattern, of course, and then count how many beads it has in one row. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 beads, which means I'm going to have 8 threads. So what I tend to do is unravel quite a bit of this off the spool, so I've got a bit to go work with. So I'm going to take the end of my thread and I'm going to tie it around here. So all I'm going to do is tie a simple knot. Oh, make sure it catches on there. Tie a knot around here, double knot it like that. So I've tied my thread onto there, and then I might just tie one more knot just to make sure it's secure. So that's tied onto there. Now I'm going to turn my loom over onto the back, and this is the bit we just tied on. I'm going to loop it around this little bit here twice. So I've gone around there twice, and then up here I'm just going to start sort of in the middle because I'm not doing a really wide piece. I'm going to start the middle, so I'm going to count how many notches I'm going in. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And I'm just going to hook that over the 15th one, like that, turn it back over. So it's hooked over that 15th one now, pulling it very tight. You're going to hold it really tight all the time, keep your tension very tight. And pull it all the way to the other end. Now I'm going to count 15 notches in from this side, just so we're not working wonky, so we're going straight down. So 15 like that, and like I said before, make sure you keep pulling it really tight. Turn it over again to the back. Keep holding it. Bring that over that loop twice and back up. Now I don't go into every one, I go into every other one. So that's the one I'm in, so I'm going to move down 2 and put it in that next one. Turn it over and then pulling that all the way down to the other end. And that's the one I'm in, so I'm going to move over 2 and going into that one. Turn it over, I'm going to go around that loop again 2 times. Bring the thread back up to the top. And again, I'm going to skip over one and go through the next one, so I'm missing one, if you can see that. Now pull that all the way down, keeping it tight all the time. Same at this end. That's the one, my last one's in. Skip one, into the next one. Round the loop on the back 2 times. Up into the next one. And keep doing that until you've got 8 strings threaded on here, and then I'll show you what to do next. So I've done that, and now I've got 8 strings, and so there's space for 7 beads, if that makes sense. So you always like one extra string than how many columns of beads you want. Okay, so I've just looped around there. I'm going to do that a couple of times. Then I'm going to bring this up here and loop around this end, and then I'm going to cut my thread but leaving a little bit left so that I can tie a quick knot. Okay, so I've got that. I'm going to tie a knot around this end. Okay, and then I'm going to cut off a little bit of that so it's not getting in my way. So now you have this. So these are your threads. You've made yourself a little instrument. If yours are loose, you shouldn't be loose at all, they should be quite tight like that. If yours are loose, it means you didn't hold your tension tight enough, and it's going to be a bit tricky to work with. So if that is the case, I'd suggest going back and doing it again to make sure they're really tight. So now I've taken what's going to be my working thread and I've cut a lot of thread. What I will say is when you're working on the loom, you do use like quite a lot of thread for it. So this is my fire line. I'm weaving with that because it doesn't tangle and I like working with it the best. But you can quite happily use the same thread that you did for your warp threads for your working thread. So I've threaded my needle onto it, and I'm going to show you how I attach it. What I do is I take my needle under this first string like that, so I've just gone through the middle of there. Pull that down until you've just got a little bit left, like this much, about this much. Like you want a good few inches like that. And up this end, like quite close to this end, I'm just going to tie a knot, just a normal knot, by taking my needle through that loop and through the loop again, just so it's definitely nice and secure. and then pull that tight so your thread is tight knotted onto there, and then this little tail that you've got, just going to pull that up here and just wrap it round. You don't need to tie a knot, you can if you want to, but the fire line sort of stays where I put it. So now we have that. So that's how I attach my working thread. Okay, so I've laid some beads out. I'm going to be doing like this colour for the outside, and then I'm going to be doing a purple and pink fade for the beads down the middle. So for your first row, you need to take your needle and you need to take it underneath all of these strings. So my needle is going underneath all of those. Okay, now I'm going to pick up my first row. So my first row is going to be 2 of your edge colour, 3 of your first middle colour. So like this, we're going to do 2 of our edge colour, 3 of our first middle colour, whatever you want that to be, and then 2 of your edge colour on the other side. So I have this. Now I'm going to slide those down so they're underneath here, pull them all the way down to there, like that. Pull them so they're right at the end, and make sure that that first bead is sitting between this first thread and this second thread, like that. Now what I tend to do is hold it like this, and each bead needs to sit in one of these spaces between the threads. So I'm going to take this thread, separate it, if you see. I'm going to take the next thread and just get one in there, take the next thread, separate that, and keep doing that until you've got this, where there's only one bead sitting in each of these spaces. Now I'm going to leave my finger there, taking my needle. So at the minute your needle is underneath this thread. So we need to loop over the top and go back into this bead. If you accidentally go under there and into that bead, it's not going to work, that bead's just going to flick off. So you're coming from underneath this thread and you're going to go over the top of this one and back through all of these beads, like that, making sure that you don't pick up any of these threads as you go. And then pull it through. Okay, and when you pull it tight, you can pull it really tight, don't worry about your threads. You should have something like this. Now it's going to keep springing open when you let go of it, don't worry about that, that will stop happening after a couple of rows. So you've got this when you pull it tight, and just make sure they're all lined up, they're nice and straight. Sometimes I'll use my needle for that. I'll just take my needle, push them all up, make sure they're all sitting in line. So now your needle's back on this side, you need to take it under those threads like that, back to the other side, so it's sitting underneath those threads. Now you're going to pick up your second row. So 2 of your outside colour, 3 of your inside colour, 2 of your outside colour. Slide those all the way down again. Keep sliding them until they're all the way down, and pull it tight again, and that'll bring it together like that. And make sure again that that first bead is sitting in place, and then you can sort of pop them up between the strings like that. Once it's all pulled tight like this, it gets a lot easier, they just sort of pop into the right place. So make sure they're all lined up and the beads are in the right place. Adjust your strings over if they're not. Then you're going to take your needle, coming out the bottom, So we're coming out the bottom here underneath the warp threads. We need to go over the top, so over like that. So we're catching that end warp thread. So make sure you're going over the top of that thread and then sew back along through them all and pull it through. And again, pull that really tight. And then if you have any gaps like this, just push those beads up, sitting in line. Okay, so I'm going to add another row. As you can see, there's another row added here, but I didn't realise it wasn't filming. So to add another row, it's the same thing. You're just going to take your needle underneath those threads to bring it through to the other side. And then you're going to pick up your row, so 2 of your outside colour every time. It's the same thing, and you can swap to your next colour whenever you want if you're doing several colours. Like this, just swap whenever you want. So 2 of your outside colour, 3 of your middle colour and 2 of your outside colour. Slide those all the way down underneath like that. So you're getting them sort of lined up already. Push them up with your finger till all these threads disappear between them like that, and push them up into place. If any of them for some reason have slotted into one string together, just adjust it so that there's one bead in each of these gaps between the warp threads. Turning it on its side again, you can see that the thread is coming out of this bead underneath this end warp thread. We need to capture that, so we need to go over the top of it, making sure you're capturing that warp thread. So back into the bead, over the top and through all of the beads in the row. Pull that down, pull it nice and tight every time, and always adjust your rows, make sure they're sitting straight. So that's how you do it. So now what you need to do is keep doing that exact same thing every time, all the way down, and you need to keep measuring it as you go and make sure you get a good length for your bracelet before you finish. And then I'm going to show you how to finish it once you've got a good length on your bracelet. And if you need to keep rewinding to watch that bit again until you get the hang of it, then that's what you can do. And then I'll show you what to do next. So I forgot to say as I was going along, if you do happen to be running out of thread, you just take your working thread. So I'm coming out of, say like you're coming out of this one, so back up through the next one and keep zigzagging across, and then tie a knot using these threads at the end, cut it off, and then to add the new piece, start a bit further away from where you want to be, sew through a few and then tie a knot, sew through a few, then tie a knot. You can cut this tail off and then keep going until you get back to where you needed to be. So that's how I do that. So now I've got to the length that I need, so this is what it looks like. I just did a little fade from purple, pink, orange into yellow. So I've still got my needle attached. Just going to put that to one side. Now I'm going to turn the bead loom over, and I'm simply going to take my scissors under all these threads here and chop them off, and that feels really good when you do that. So that's that end just chopped off, and the other end should just hook off of the loom. So then I'm going to take all those strings at the other end and just cut them, because they're all in little loops at the minute, just so they're all separated. So now we have this. I got this, so lay it down on your bead mat, flatten it out, make sure it's not got any bumps in it from the tension. So now what I'm going to do is, starting with one side, you'll have 2 strings at the end like this, because one of them is your working thread, like the end of your working thread. So I'm going to hold all of these to the side like that, and I'm going to start with these 2 on the end and the next one. So the first 2 threads basically, plus your working thread, and I'm going to tie them in a knot. So these two over that one and then thread them through the loop, bring it down, don't pull it too tight, just so it touches the top of the beadwork. I'm going to do a double knot. Okay, so we have one knot, now you can pull them to the side. Okay, so now you're going to be working with the next two. So find your next two strings and do the same thing, tie them together. So there's my second knot, now you're going to find the next two strings and tie them together. Do the same thing with your last two strings. So you should have these 4 little knots like this. Now what you're going to do is take the last 2 knots and put them underneath. So you've got your first 2 knots like this. You're going to take all the strings from this knot and all the strings from this knot, and you're going to tie them together as well. So now you have this. Do the same with the 2 knots at this end. So now you've got 2 knots like this, you're just going to tie all of those together. Okay, don't pull it tight, just like this, just till it sits on top of the beadwork. Then pull it down. Gently tighten it, but you don't want to cause this to bunch up, so as you do it, just straighten this out. Make sure it's not too tight. So now you have this. Now what I usually do is take all those strings and just create a simple knot with all of them. And when you pull that knot down, make sure it tightens at the bottom like that. Okay, so you've got this. Now you need to do the exact same thing on the other side. Okay, so once you've done that on both ends, then you can take threads and cut them fairly close to the knot. Like that. Okay, and then I usually take like a piece of plastic, a little plastic bag or something, and then I'm going to get some of my super glue, or if you have a thread zapper, use the thread zapper. I'm just going to put a little drop out of super glue on there, and I'm going to dip the knot into it to coat the ends of those threads, and the same on the other end. So literally just coating the ends of those knots so they don't come undone. So now you're going to need your slide end tube. So one end should already be opened a little bit, but I just grab hold of it like that and pull it all the way open so I can see what I'm doing. So you're going to take your tube, and it's got this little slit along the bottom. You just take it over the first row of beads. So just sort of manoeuvre it until that little slit slides down the gap between the first row and the second row, and then keep sliding along. Just keep sliding it along. It can be a little bit tricky to start with. Once you get the hang of it, it works. You might have to keep looking on the back and making sure these beads are sitting down flat so they'll slide into place, and keep pressing your knot in. Make sure that slides in there as well. Okay, until you've got it slid on all the way across, like that. And then what I usually do as well is take the super glue again and just drop a drop inside there as well. just to make sure it's really stuck. Then I'm going to take my pliers, grab hold of this little tube and bend it forwards a little bit to get it started, and then I'll do it like this until that tube end is closed, like that. So that's how I finish it off. It's just a really nice finish. I'm going to do the same on the other end. That's how I finish it off. Now all I need to do is just attach my clasp in the usual way onto these little hooks, and that's us finished. Okay, so that's the finished bracelet once I've attached my clasp, so I think it turned out really nice. So I hope you enjoyed this and found it helpful for if you're just getting started with the loom or just to follow this pattern. So I hope you're able to make one of these. Like I said, I'll leave the links below for all the different things that I mentioned. I think these look great all lined up together. And I'd love to see any creations that you come up with on the loom. I think it's such a fun tool to use for beading, and it makes such a neat, like, satisfying result. So let me know what you think, comment down below what else you'd like to see, and like this video if you enjoyed, and subscribe to see more of my videos. Follow me on Instagram at beadingbyhannah. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.